So let me see if I can summarize the battle between US lawmakers and TikTok. The US government doesn't trust the Chinese government. TikTok was founded by Chinese entrepreneurs. It's owned by a Chinese company. And the US believes that if China wanted to extract precious user data from TikTok's 170 million monthly active American users, or sow political chaos by flooding the platform with propaganda, it could do that. So it passed a law that shuts TikTok down unless it cuts its American operation off from everything else.
TikTok presents serious national security risks to the people of the United States.
On the other hand, TikTok says, what are you doing? You're punishing us over a hypothetical. You can't just force us to shut down without a viable alternative. And telling us to cut our own arm off is not a viable alternative. TikTok USA dies if it can't be managed, maintained, and powered by TikTok Global. So you're offering no real choice here. You're just deplatforming us, and that goes against our First Amendment rights.
The fact is, US politicians are trying to ban TikTok because they can't control what we say on here. This app has become an important platform for free speech.
TikTok just sued the American government this week for violating the Constitution. But then we asked 3 different law and policy experts what they thought, and we got a whole range of responses.
Definitely, they've got some very strong First Amendment arguments.
I think it's a jump ball.
Even if they can convince a court that it should look at this as a de facto ban, that doesn't mean that they win.
So who does win in the end? We've already done an explainer on the government side of this, so let's see if we can make sense of TikTok's position.
Rest assured, we aren't going anywhere. We are confident and we will keep fighting for your rights in the courts. The facts and the Constitution are on our side, and we expect to prevail again.
TikTok's legal argument comes in 2 parts. Its first point is that it's a complete non-choice to be told either you get shut down because we'll make it illegal for anyone to download your app, or you sell your company.
The bill literally begins with a ban, and then it says, but you can unban yourself if you sell. If you don't sell, you're banned.
And what makes this tough from TikTok's point of view is that the sale by law would have to create a really clean break from the global company. It forbids any operational relationship between the new American-owned arm of TikTok and any formerly affiliated entities that are controlled by a foreign adversary, which means every other part of TikTok controlled by China. But TikTok says any version of the app that has no operational relationship with the global company just doesn't work. Not commercially, not technologically, not legally. On the first 2 fronts, TikTok, they say, only functions as a whole. Americans expect international content, not just American content. It also operates on millions of lines of source code. They say you can't just excise the American part and think that American engineers could magically take it all over and make it work. Such a fundamental re-architecting is not remotely feasible. Now, it's worth pointing out, we don't actually have any way of knowing whether that's true, right? Like, they say it can't be done, but who knows until you're forced to try.
TikTok and ByteDance are making some very aggressive claims in this regard. It's not clear to us whether this specific demand by the US government couldn't actually be implemented with and still have a viable platform.
Of course, a divested TikTok might be smaller than a global TikTok, but it would still exist.
But the other reason TikTok says it can't just sell off a chunk of its company is that it doesn't think China would allow it. You see, China strictly regulates the export of certain technologies. They can be a bit like national secrets. The TikTok algorithm, the secret sauce that so finely tunes the selection of videos that appear in your feed, that would very likely count as a kind of valuable information processing technology.
So TikTok's argument essentially is we can't do it, and we can't do it legally because they say China is going to block any effort to sell this.
So TikTok's position, you're asking us to make TikTok in the US an American company, but China won't let us sell the algorithm, so that's not really an option. Question is, does that point help or hurt their case?
That in some sense helps actually prove the government's point that the Chinese government cares a lot about this, that has a lot of power over it. And so provides further ammunition for the government's argument that it's precisely the Chinese nature of ByteDance and the power that the Chinese government can have over ByteDance that justifies the law.
This argument that TikTok isn't being given any meaningful option but to shut down is a big part of why it believes this boils down to a free speech issue. That the app's very existence is itself a kind of speech. Curating people's feeds helps shape a global conversation, and shutting down the app would infringe on the free speech rights of TikTok and of 170 million Americans.
I don't think you guys are understanding just how dystopian the Alabama IVF ruling actually is.
And it's important for us to keep all our eyes on Rafah right now because there's over 1.9 million displaced Palestinians.
Tell me what the point of having health insurance in America is? Because my deductible went up to $9,100 this year.
Now, of course, the right to free speech is not absolute. You can't yell fire in a crowded movie theater and expect the First Amendment to protect you. So TikTok says the United States would have to do two things to make a violation of free speech constitutional. One, you better have a good reason to limit what a person or company can say. And two, if there's a better way of doing things without infringing on free speech, do that first. Let's go through those one at a time, starting with what evidence there is that the Chinese government is using TikTok for some nefarious goal.
Of what nation are you a citizen?
Singapore.
Are you a citizen of any other nation?
No, Senator.
Have you ever applied for Chinese citizenship?
Senator, I served my nation in Singapore.
No,
I did not.
That was TikTok's CEO being grilled by US lawmakers, probing for any incriminating connection to China. But so far, just about every public piece of evidence from the US government has been framed as a what if. What if China demands information about American users from TikTok? What if China uses TikTok as a propaganda arm, feeding disinformation to Americans and during an election year?
Have you ever been a member of the Chinese Communist Party?
Senator, I'm Singaporean. No.
Have you ever been associated or affiliated with the Chinese Communist Party?
No, Senator. Again, I'm Singaporean.
When you think about all the information that they can glean from everyone that uses the app.
We have not yet seen the government's evidence of why they are especially concerned about TikTok.
There's a lot that we don't know, including from what national security folks in the United States and the briefings they provided to lawmakers and the president, which can't be revealed for national security reasons.
Now, CNN did report last year accusations that China used TikTok to spy on pro-democracy protesters in Hong Kong in 2018 by using backdoor access to TikTok to identify and monitor the activists' locations and communications. But most experts say, and from everything we've read, there's no real smoking gun so far that China has used TikTok against the US. Still, that doesn't mean the concern isn't real.
So, for example, we know that the Chinese government has engaged in mass espionage in the United States to get US person data.
A diplomatic row has erupted between the US and China after a balloon was spotted at high altitude in the skies over America, which it says is being used for surveillance.
Investigators also accuse Huawei's engineers of stealing trade secrets from cell phone provider T-Mobile.
The FBI keeps an active watch on perceived economic and security threats from China, covering everything from hackers to electric vehicle trade secrets to the theft of quantum technology.
We know, and it's not speculative, the Chinese government is willing to, in a very heavy-handed way, influence its private companies when it views that to be in its national interest. So I think the question for the government to prove and for the courts to decide is whether that is enough to justify this law.
But beyond proving or disproving whether the United States actually faces a real threat from a Chinese-owned TikTok, or enough of a threat anyway to warrant violating TikTok's constitutional right to free speech, this case may actually wind up hinging on one more thing. Project Texas is what TikTok calls a multi-year effort to negotiate directly with the US government to address this perceived threat to national security of Chinese government influence. According to TikTok's lawsuit, it drafted a 90-page agreement that would have, among other things, stored all protected US user data with a US government-approved partner, Oracle Corporation, which would also review and vet the TikTok's source code. It claims to have already spent more than $2 billion to build a system of technological and governance protections, and it even agreed to a shutdown option that would give the government the authority to suspend TikTok in the United States if it broke certain critical sections of the agreement.
This is one of TikTok's stronger arguments because there is this alternative that TikTok was developing, and it's a pretty serious alternative.
But then, as a final deal seemed near, it fell apart.
My concern, Mr. Chu, is I don't believe that it is technically possible to accomplish what TikTok says it will accomplish through Project Texas.
That Project Texas is more than a marketing scheme. That TikTok doesn't harm our innocent children. Or that your ties to the Chinese Communist Party through ByteDance is just a myth. We aren't buying it.
This idea, this Project Texas, is simply not acceptable.
So the question before a judge will be, how real is the threat? Was the US government too quick to dismiss TikTok's efforts to keep China out?
Were those measures enough to deal with the national security concerns? Or was there something more that TikTok should have done? Or is this the only other option, which is to really essentially say, you can't have Chinese owners, or you just must be banished from the country?
I think what will really be weighed is the First Amendment principles versus the national security implications.
So this is where we stand. TikTok has until January 19th, 2025 to comply with the law to either shut down or sell. If TikTok wins this case, that deadline goes away. If it loses, this could go all the way to the Supreme Court. Meantime, the US war on TikTok continues even as lawmakers, both Republican and Democrat, and even the president himself continue to post.
The state of our union is strong and getting stronger.